The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here along with my guest co-host this week, Dan Rylance. Dan is filling in because, as most of you probably know by now, my regular co-host Tony Palmieri is seeking a position on the Oshkosh Common Council and therefore has, at least during campaign season, recused himself from participating in the interviews. So that's why Dan is here, and we're very pleased to have
glad
you
to be here.
Thank you very
Thank
much. Joining us also on this edition is Dan Becker. Now, Dan is running for the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education. 2 seats are available this time around. Karen Bowen is the incumbent, and she is, of course, seeking re-election. We interviewed her on a previous show, and Don Sween has served 1 term. He has decided not to seek re-election, so there will be at least 1 new face on the school board come April. And Dan is hoping that that face will be his. So thanks very much for being here. We appreciate you taking time out. You know, you lost last April by a very narrow margin.
I did.
And now you're hoping to get back on the board. For people who don't know who you are, don't remember anything about you, or maybe are a newcomer to the area, why don't you tell us a little bit about who Dan Becker is and why you want to get on the school board?
Well, Dan Becker has been a resident of this community for the last 14 years. I did have the privilege of serving on the school board from 2003 to 2006. I'm passionate about our children. I think they are our future. Now, I know that sounds cliche, but you know, they really are the future of this community. They're going to be the leaders of this nation, of this state. We need to do what we can to make sure that their programs are preserved so that they can receive the best quality education. I've spent a number of years actively involved with children in this community, not just on the school board during my first term, but also as a coach in a variety of youth activities here in the community, to include Oshkosh Youth Baseball, as well as a number of programs at the YMCA here in the community.
Okay. All right, and you know, we're going to talk about some of the issues that are facing the school board this year and in years to come. We'll do that in just a few minutes, but want to get the ugly part of this out of the way right off the bat. You know, as I said in the opening, you lost last spring by a very narrow margin, and there was a recount that ensued as a result of that narrow margin loss or victory for Amy Weinsheim. And you were criticized rather harshly for not requesting a recount, but for conduct, if you will, during the recount. And I was one of those critics, Dan. You know, I thought that you were well within your rights to ask for a recount. It was, I guess, what happened during the recount that really upset a lot of people, myself included. And one of those things was, you know, I mean, the whole purpose of a recount is to ensure that votes are counted properly. And it seemed like in this particular recount, we were looking to have votes eliminated.
No, I think I beg to differ with you there,
Well, tell us
Cheryl,
about that.
because I believe the process, or the purpose of a recount, is to ensure that properly cast ballots are counted. And truth be told, there were a number of ballots in that election that were cast improperly, as evidenced by the fact that ultimately a number of ballots were tossed out because of various procedural difficulties that transpired that evening.
But there were a lot that were attempted to be tossed out that were kept in, because the State Elections Board says if you can discern what a voter's intent is, then that vote counts. I mean, that's, you know, that's not the legal jargon, obviously, but that's layman's terms. Well, let's talk about St. John's Lutheran. I mean, there was an issue there where we read the headlines in the newspaper that you wanted to have all those ballots tossed out.
Well, my opinion, there was some hypocrisy on the Board of Canvassers during the process of the recount. They were all too willing to toss out ballots that lacked signatures, but at the same time were not willing to toss out an entire bag of ballots that was unsigned.
Lacked signatures from the two election officials?
Lacked signatures on the seal for that bag.
Okay.
Well,
So,
you were
a
there.
bit of hypocrisy.
I mean,
Yeah. Well, I went just one day, and I couldn't believe one of your objections was the school district, which was running the recount, you objected to the tellers that they selected. Now, why would you do that?
Because there was a conflict of interest between the Board of Canvassers and the tabulators that they so chose. As school district employees, they have a vested interest in who sits on that board because we negotiate, we have their fate in our hands as board members.
Well, Teresa Collins ran it. She's a school board employee.
Well, by statute, there's no objection to be made there. The board chose her.
She'd go pick someone outside the school district employees to be the tellers?
Unbeknownst to anybody out there, the option exists for them to pick anybody they wanted
I see.
to be those tabulators.
Okay.
They chose to
Okay.
pick school district employees.
In hindsight, you know, didn't you bully too much and to go on for 5 days at a lawyer cost of over $20,000, a bit too much?
It was not my choice to have that lawyer in that room, Mr. Rylance, during that entire process.
But it was your choice to stay there 5 or 6 days.
No, it was not. It absolutely was not my choice. I stood in that room and I made sure that things were followed properly.
But you challenged almost everything that came up.
On advice of counsel. Because if push came to shove and we had to go to circuit court, and I'm going to remind everybody I didn't do that because I admit I lost,
Yeah.
truth be told.
Yeah.
But to preserve the legal right, I did have to object on legal counsel to some of those things.
So you
Just
really
preserve
you
the right.
have no remorse about the recount at all?
I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
I do regret that it did cost as much as it did.
Okay.
Again, truth be told, I lost, and I admit it.
Yeah.
Guilty as charged. I lost. Simple as that.
did you learn anything as a result of the recount? I mean, other than that, there are problems with the process, which is, I maintain, the very reason why recounts are done, is because people are human, and you know, equipment is programmed by humans, and everyone's subject to error. But other than that, have you learned anything else as a result of the recount? And would you do it differently if you had to do it again tomorrow?
Well, I made a name for myself while being on the board in terms of holding people accountable, Cheryl, and I did nothing else during the recount but do just that. Would I handle things differently? Would I? Sure. I mean, hindsight's 20/20. But I think when all was said and done, the recount was valid. And again, no apologies for asking for it. You know, certainly would, as I already said, regret some of the cost involved with it, but it needed to be done
Okay.
just to ensure the validity. Given
Can I
some
go
of
with
the
one more tough question?
Oh,
before
sure.
we
Go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but
Sure.
when you were on this show last time, and when Cheryl always asked at the end of the show to say why people should vote for you, I remember this quote because I thought, God, what does he mean by this? You said, correct me if I'm wrong, vote yes for me so I can vote no for you.
That's exactly what I said. And you
Would
know why?
Would you please explain that?
I would absolutely
Okay.
be happy to explain that. The school board over the last few years has put us into a situation that is causing us now, as we sit here tonight, to look at closing quite a few buildings and making some drastic changes.
Okay.
That's because no one on that board has the courage to say no. That board, as it sits now and has sat for the last few terms, is a rubber stamp for administration. Somebody needs to stand up for the citizens of this community and say, hey, enough is enough. We're going to ask the tough questions. We're going to make sure this works. We're going to make sure that it's feasible before we let it move forward. That's all I'm trying to do by trying
It
to get back on
sounds
the
so
board.
negative. I mean, should you be on a board only to vote no?
No, you shouldn't. And the vast majority of my votes were not no.
Okay.
The vast majority of my votes were yes. But when a big issue came forward that the public questioned, AKA the school calendar, AKA union negotiations, good conscience said, you got to vote no, Becker, because the community doesn't support this, or it's not in the best interest of the kids to have time torn out of their day from an instructional perspective.
If the school board has been so badly performing, Why is it, or how is it, that we have buildings in such disrepair? If they've been spending money just sort of willy-nilly, and we need someone to say no to some of this stuff, then how is it that we have buildings in such great disrepair right now, that we have to, rate them, and some have a 0 rating, and some are being closed in the future? What happened there then?
Because the priorities were wrong, Cheryl, quite honestly. We were funneling money into things other than building upkeep. We were funneling money into unnecessary increases in salary and benefits. We were funneling money into, and it ties back into it, but unnecessary money into roofs. Now you're going to say that's probably sounds strange, but it was demonstrated that we overpaid for roofs in years past. That's not in the best interests of the taxpayers. It's not in the best interests of the children of this community, because what it does then is forces us to take a look at budget cuts to balance the budget. And where do the vast majority of those budget cuts come from? Programs, which in turn impact our children. I am not a big fan of cutting programs, plain and simple. We need to show a little bit more fiscal restraint in how we approach things. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we need to take a wholesale look at how we do things from a fiscal perspective, but I hope the board could return to some common sense and look at things bigger picture. What will this community support? I mean, looking at the facilities plan that's on the table now, a key point in this whole process is the need for a $40 to $50 million referendum. My opinion, the district's going to have a hard time selling that to this community.
Well, and as I think we've learned through the process of interviewing the school board candidates, listening to the forums, and reading some of the things on the district's website, I'm not sure that figure has actually been. I mean, it could go that high possibly, but nobody really seems to know for sure, and
that
some
too
of
is
that
part of the
has to
problem.
be fleshed out. Well, it's a big project. I mean, it's taken us years to even get to this point where they're able to get off the dime. So let's talk about this 10-year plan. Part of the plan is to send the kids from Sunset over to Reed and to make Tipler a full-time middle school again. How do you feel about that particular piece of the plan? And then secondly, how do you feel about the plan as a whole?
The Sunset move, those poor children have been through a multitude of change over the last few years. Mm-hmm. I'm encouraged that we found him hopefully a permanent home at this point in time. It's closer to their residences. I mean, those children came from, well, obviously Sunset School originally, so moving them to Reed is closer to home for them. So the bus trip hopefully will be shorter. That remains to be seen. So in short, I think that's a good move on the district's part. The plan as a whole, as I alluded to in the League of Women Voters debate just a few days ago, there's too many unanswered questions as part of this process, in my opinion, Cheryl. I was shocked, disheartened, if you will, when the fact came to light that there was a major flaw in the plan as it relates to closing South Park Middle School. To invest in, I mean, if people will recall, I was part of the Facilities and Finance Committee that brought this idea forward, and I was proud of that. But to have administration not do basic fact-checking to make sure it works from a sheer numbers perspective was unconscionable, in my opinion. To put this community through that sort of turmoil, and then to have it come out that, no, I'm sorry, it just won't work. Bad PR, big time egg on the face of this district.
Okay. As part of that, you have said that voting on a one-year plan is pointless. Mm-hmm. Explain, because we're talking in terms of a 10-year plan, so explain for the audience who may not understand what you mean by that, how you'd be voting on a one-year plan, and then as a follow-up to that, I guess, what is the alternative?
Well, my point in that comment was that if we don't know what the longer, maybe not long-term, but longer-term ramifications are, if we don't know what's going to happen in year 2 and 3, how is it that we make an informed decision about year 1? Because it's all trickled down. What we do in year 1 is going to impact years 2 and 3. So to vote on that first year without having some of the details of year 2 and 3 makes it very difficult, at least from my perspective, to make an informed vote on that plan.
So what's the alternative?
The alternative, in my opinion, would be certainly to have at least more detail about those subsequent years. Maybe not necessarily to vote on it as a full 10-year package, because obviously things change. Variables change. Employers bring in families. They expand. They close plants. Hopefully they don't.
Yeah.
But things happen. I would have at least liked to see some of the additional details in subsequent years, so that we, I say we, but the board could make that decision with some facts.
But as a fiscal conservative, can we afford to wait longer to find out more of those details, and also, I mean, you're a very big proponent of communicating
Absolutely.
as much in advance as possible to the parents in the district, and I think that's one of the things that the board is trying to accomplish right now is being able to give the parents of children in whatever school is going to be closed next year as much fair notice as possible. So can we afford to wait?
I commend the district for getting upfront on some of these issues, but at the same time, they've lacked in a few areas, quite honestly. We look at consolidating Green Meadow and Lakeside. No real firm information was put out there on that issue as well. So if we're going to communicate the change to those communities, the folks on the southeast and southwest side of town, don't we owe them, the detail on it? How is this going to directly impact me?
There was a false alarm at Lincoln, too,
Exactly.
wasn't it? Huh? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's not in the best interest of our community. You put people into a state of fear, dare I say. We've got to do a better job communicating with the community as a whole.
Okay.
And I've to real distinct ideas on how we can do that, but we'll talk about
This
that
is a fun
at a later
question.
date.
What's the last book you read for fun?
To be brutally honest with you, Mr. Rylance, I don't read a whole lot of novels. I usually spend my time reading news periodicals.
Okay. What's the last history book you read, the nonfiction? Don't have to make it exclusively fiction.
What's the last? Wow, geez, that's a tough question. It was probably. I'm a real big fan of John Grisham.
Okay. Did you like the nonfiction one he did on? Did you read that, the last one?
No, I'm
Okay.
a
The Murder
couple
of-
books
they said
behind.
He should have
for
stuck
him.
to fiction, but he tried a nonfiction one.
Go out on a limb with him. Huh?
I want to pay you a compliment. I've been told by a couple of custodians that one of the really good things you did on your one term on the board was to sort of listen to them and go to their meetings and things. And how did we get to the privatization of plant services or building and grounds? And what's your opinion of it?
That was brought forward by our previous director of finance, Brad Kaufman.
Okay.
He brought it forward as a way to save costs. It was sold to the board as it's got a big upfront expense, big yearly expense that this national company, in fact multinational company, could, through its purchasing power, save the district money in the long term because we could avail ourselves of their purchasing power for materials, supplies, and such, and as well bring some additional expertise to the district. The district up to that point had actually been hiring out consultants to look at roofs and other various issues, and the folks at Sodexo supposedly had those type of folks on staff that could provide that service for us. That all being said, when that actually came forward to the board for a vote, myself and I believe it was Mr. Kavanaugh voted no. I am not a big fan of giving up control of those type of issues to outside firms.
A lot of fear and dissatisfaction by the custodians as to what the
There
future is, huh?
There is.
Yeah.
And
the board
to a
doesn't
certain
seem
extent,
overly
rightfully so.
responsive to them as much as they are to teachers or administrators, is that?
I would agree with you on that one, yeah.
Yeah. As a conservative, what do you think of the federal government taking over public education and No Child Left Behind?
I think the purpose of No Child Left Behind is good, making sure that every child is provided an opportunity to achieve to a certain level.
Okay.
The problem I do have with No Child Left Behind, as you said, being a fiscal conservative, is the mandates that come down without the dollars to support them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, all those mandates then fall onto either the state and ultimately onto the local taxpayer.
Can I read you one quote from Charles Murray, who's the author of The Bell Curve? He says, NCLB is a disaster for federalism. It pushes classrooms toward relentless drilling, not something that inspires able people to become teachers or make children eager to learn. It holds good students hostage to the performance of the least talented at a time when the economic future of the country depends more than ever on the performance of the most talented. Agree or disagree?
I can't necessarily disagree with that. We are teaching to the middle, if you will. Again, I mentioned the program cuts in this district.
Right.
One of the things, and you and I talked off camera about this, is the cuts in gifted and talented in this district. That's unfortunate because, as I said, the children are the future of the community and the state and the country as a whole. Would I like to see that change? Absolutely, I would, but it's going to take some dollars to get the programs back.
Do you think the school district is lacking in a gifted and talented program?
Well, if you ask the folks in administration about that, they'll say no, because they've been able to do some different things and differentiate education. But as the parent of a gifted and talented student, it's not nearly what it used to be, and that's unfortunate.
A judge down in Dane County just has ordered the DPI to prepare specific rules for school districts to use in identifying gifted and talented students.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, okay.
All righty.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the school closure thing for just a couple of moments, Dan. One of the things that we keep hearing needs to be looked at in school closings and so forth is this matter of socioeconomics. How much of a role do you think socioeconomics should play in our long-range facilities plan?
It's certainly a consideration in the long-range facilities plan, Cheryl, but at the same time, we can't dictate or mandate where folks live. And we need to draw our boundaries based on geography for the most part. I mean, certainly we've got some flexibility there, but we can't, for instance, pull a pocket way on the west side of town to go to North High School. It just doesn't make sense for a variety of reasons. I'm very hesitant to make the students of this community into a sociology experiment. That's not our business. If folks remember, at one point, right after North was built, the paradigm was shifted. North was seen as the affluent school, and West was not. Well, things are cyclical. Things have a tendency to balance themselves out over time from socioeconomic perspectives as well as a variety of other things. So, while I believe it needs to be evaluated, taken into consideration, I'm not going to make it the deal breaker. Any sort of restructuring plan.
Okay. And how do you feel about a 9, 10, 11, 12 high school?
Can't tell you how bad I think that is, how bad of an idea that I think that is.
Explain to viewers what that is. And I probably should have done that, but go ahead.
The idea or trial balloon that's been floated in the community is to solve some of the socioeconomic issues that the schools supposedly currently face, and maybe to a certain extent do, is to split the population into a 9-10 building and an 11-12 building.
All students 9-10, all students 11-12.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
One of my primary problems with that is I think it solves some problems, it creates far more. One of the issues that this district has faced over the last few years, in particular at North High School, is something called singletons, which is one section offering of a particular class. They're typically higher level classes, your calculuses, your upper level sciences, those type of things. There's only a small handful of students that are able to take that class. So you wind up teaching 1 hour of Physics 2, 1 hour of Bio 2, whatever the case may be. Well, that in and of itself is a problem from a scheduling perspective, both for administration and for the kids, because their choices are then restricted because they've got to take that class during the hour it's offered. They have no other choice. Well, if you've got a 9-10 and an 11-12 building, guess what happens? If you've got, and again, my son is gifted and talented, he could conceivably be taking 11th grade or 12th grade math when he's in 10th grade.
Not in the same school.
Not in the same building he won't be, unless we offer a singleton class. So we're right back where we started from. We've put people through some major angst to deploy this solution, and we're right back where we started from that perspective. Bring into the equation some other logistics issues. Right now, if anyone drives past West High School during the course of a school day, you've got cars parked for blocks and blocks in a radius around that building. Well, guess what? If we make that the 11 and 12 building, we're going to have even more cars. We've got parking problems. We've got busing problems galore as part of an 9, 10, 11, 12 plan, because every student, every high school student that doesn't drive, can't drive, doesn't want to take the city bus is going to be on a bus, a school bus paid for by by the taxpayers.
I could, if we did that, I could rent out my driveway probably during the school day.
Another, yeah.
Make a little extra money for my household.
Well, you better ask that of a city council.
Adequate communication. Communication within the school district for a number of years, as you know, was really lacking.
Yeah.
It was pretty deplorable. And I think even just people approaching the school board felt a little, I don't know, like they just felt like they couldn't approach the school board. And that has changed over the last couple of years, and I'm not sure what that's attributed to, if it's the complexion of the board these days, or what exactly. But it has improved, and I see that, and I've heard that in the community. What do you feel the communication is right now? And I'm assuming by your body language and you shaking your head that you think it should improve. What do you think needs to be done differently?
Well, I think people are, to a certain extent, while the outbound communication is good, the reciprocation is not.
Mm-hmm.
We don't hear from enough folks coming to the board to express their concerns, to even say, "Attaboy, good job," kind of a scenario. I would like to see more folks play an active part in the process. I mean, obviously it's cliche, but communication is a two-way street. Mm-hmm. I think it's unfortunate people don't feel comfortable in bigger numbers coming to the board to speak. And I think that's in part because the board is not as responsive as it should be to citizens that come forward. We've discussed this in years past, Cheryl. The school calendar, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
We had 600 folks sign a petition to make a change to the school calendar, and as recently as this morning, the calendar is the same, roughly. Small tweak here, a small tweak there, but I think people get worn down. They realize it's not going to make any difference. Why should I bother? I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, don't let that happen. Get out there, let your voice be heard. Make sure that the board members know how you feel about particular issues. I've always made myself available, and I think that's important for every board member to undertake. And if the voters see fit to return me to the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education, I will again hold Saturday afternoon listening sessions at least once a month to garner that public input, to see what the voters think, to see what the community values, because that's important. It is a representative form of government. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about, folks.
Okay. Well, and one of the ways that people can let their voice be heard, of course, is at the ballot box.
That is true.
And they're going to be doing that on Tuesday, February 20th. Why don't you take about 30 seconds, look into camera 3, Dan, and tell folks why they should vote for you on February 20th. Why don't you just vote for you at all?
Yeah. Folks, ladies and gentlemen, I have the experience, I have the passion. I've, as evidenced by the fact that I did ask for a recount last April, I've got a vested interest in how the school district operates, how they educate your children. I would like to see the days of increased taxes, increased fees, and cut programs and services slow down at the very least and go away if at all possible. We need to effect some change in the Oshkosh Area School District, ladies and gentlemen. Long has it been since we've actually seen a budget that we don't have to cut millions of dollars from to help budget or to help balance. So if you would, I would appreciate your vote on February 20th. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thanks so much. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Jessica King, who is running for the Oshkosh Common Council. So we'll be right back.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
By foot.
Run across a border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in California, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. If you speak your mind, you're dead.
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here.
I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
Hi, and welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. We're joined now by Jessica King. She is one of 7 candidates seeking a position on the Oshkosh Common Council. There is a primary election, as we've mentioned earlier in the show, coming up on Tuesday, February 20th. At that time, one of the 7 candidates for council will be eliminated, and 6 will proceed to the general election being held on Tuesday, April 3rd. So right now, we're, as I mentioned, very pleased to welcome Jessica King. Do you prefer Jess or Jessica?
I prefer Jess.
Jess.
All right, well,
Oh,
that's what we're going to call you
Jess.
then.
First answer. Easy question. Good way to start it
Everybody
out.
knows These were tough interviews that we do here.
Right.
They'll get a little tougher, trust me.
Okay, well, know your name. Good call.
2 of the seats that are up for re-election, of course, are currently held by Meredith Shireman and Brian Bain, both of whom are seeking re-election. The 3rd seat currently held by Shirley Maddox. She has decided not to seek re-election, so that is the seat that is open. And so, regardless of how anybody votes, there will be one new face on the Common Council this April. And
Well, two.
one for council. There will be a mayoral
Right.
position that
That's
we're
true.
going to vote on, but one council person per se. And you're of course hoping that it's going to be you. So,
Yes.
why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to serve on the Oshkosh Common Council?
Sure. Starting off, my background, I'm originally from Fond du Lac. A lot of people ask me, are you related to any Kings in Oshkosh? And answer is no.
Okay.
I went to, my first exposure to the community was attending UW Oshkosh as a college student. So I was here from 1993 to 98. I triple majored at UW Oshkosh in International Studies, Political Science, and History. While at the university, I got a lot of exposure into representative organizations, and I was the president of the Oshkosh Student Association from 1997 to 98. And you may remember, or the community will likely remember, that that was the time when the students were asked whether or not they wanted to go forward with Project 2000, which was the union renovation, the $19 million union renovation of Reeve Memorial Union. And that was a very contentious debate at the time when I was president of OSA. And that's where I started, I guess, as far as, do you believe in representative government? Do you believe that it's an effective tool? Can it be utilized to accomplish things? So I got that exposure at that point in my life and got some faith in it, that, if you participate and you organize your coalition and you do your grassroots work, you can actually affect the decision-making process. After graduating UW Oshkosh, I decided I wanted to go to law school. My father is a former Navy man, and he said, if you ever get a chance, move to San Diego. So I looked at some law schools, and I ended up finding that actually San Diego had a very good law school. And so I moved there, went to law school, got my certificate in global legal studies. After I passed the bar exam, I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. And while I was out there, I practiced as a staff attorney representing medical facility providers against insurance companies. And I did that for about a year and a half. I worked with 60 other attorneys. After approximately 1 year, I was promoted to senior staff attorney, which meant I managed 7 other attorneys in my department. And then, of course, there comes a time in everybody's life where maybe family calls. And I have a lot of my relatives. My dad's one of 15 Irish Catholic, big family in Fond du Lac. Anyway, I realized that it was important for me to be back in Wisconsin. And then when I was looking at, well, where do I move? Do I go to Fond du Lac? Do I go to Milwaukee? Where do I go? And the reality is I really kind of fell in love with Oshkosh, with this community in this area. I had had such a positive experience in college, gotten so many opportunities that I chose here. I liked what was here. And then when I got here, you start to get more involved and you realize things could be better. Things could be different. And I thought, I instinctively go to government because that's my educational background, that was my experience, that it's what you need to do. If you're not happy with something, I can sit and complain about my taxes, or I can sit and complain, but I have to get involved. So that's why I decided, why not become the decision maker? And if I run for election and tell people what I think about things, either they like what I have to say or they don't. And to be quite honest, if you can't express those things and people don't want, if you can't be blunt about how you think about things, well, if people don't vote for me because I am blunt, that's okay. Because I don't want to be leading a ship the way people don't want it to be led.
Okay. So what aren't you happy with about the way things are running, and what would you like to see done differently?
To be honest with you, I truly appreciate the financial stress we're under. I think that one of the roles of a council member or of government is to really advocate and be aggressive for what needs to be done. And the reality is there's an attack on local control, local municipal government. And one of the things that I know, I also was an adjunct teacher at the university, and I taught community power systems. And, in that class, you really learn that local government is where you get your best benefit as a citizen, because that's where you can have your input. Local government is actually making decisions that the average person can feel in their day-to-day life. And I think that's what we see, right? I mean, look at what happened with the garbage fee, or look what's happening with some of the ordinances. And you say, well, what government do people really understand affects them? People have a hard time with federal government, have a hard time with state government. They think it's too far away. Well, local government is right there. At the same time, I think it's a responsibility for the council members to start explaining the value of local government, and then to also rally the population by defining that value and say, we need to start going after state and federal government and say, listen, you can't ask us to operate under the same mandates when you put a levy limit on us that does not respect inflation, does not respect the rising costs, and then at the same time decrease our shared revenue. And the point is, who else is going to advocate for that position if not the council members? And
you should have run for the legislature. Well, that's where we could have used someone like you.
I have faith in Gordon. And we obviously made a change recently in what we have, and I am not afraid to hold him accountable. I'm not afraid to call Carol. I'm not afraid to call Doyle. And I think that's the kind of representatives we need. I mean, we can sit and talk all we want about should we cut 2 police cars, should we cut a garbage truck, but in the end, those aren't solutions. Those are attempts at using a Band-Aid to cover a gunshot. It's not the way things need to change on a macro level, bigger level.
Okay. Well, let's start running through some of these questions here and see how many of these we can hit. Do you want to jump in on this?
Sure, whatever.
All right, go for it.
I can't resist. I was teasing her about the name King before we came in. So I just came up with this question now. If you were king for one day as a member of the Common Council, what one thing would you do that you had the power to do to make the city of Oshkosh better?
Wow, that is not a normal question. So I can make any decision I want.
Absolutely. You're king for a day.
King for a day.
Yep.
Honestly, if I could do one thing, it would have to do with allowing citizens to have some ownership of the process of budgeting, for example, or having them say, here is my contribution. This is what my priorities are, and to say, and the idea of being king for a day would be, I would have the ability to actually take all that in, because the problem is we have a population of 65,000 people, and to say what are their priorities. Obviously, they all hit different masses, they all hit different congregation, different groups. And to say because one of the hardest things as a council member is really appreciating what the population really needs. And when you've got really loud squeaky wheels, those are the ones that people kind of respond to, as opposed to the unmet needs. So I guess, honestly, if I could be king for a day, I'd like to be omniscient. Okay. I would like to know.
I think we should let her be king for a day. All right. I have one follow-up on that.
Sure.
As someone who had a lot of experience in student government, I've lived here since '98, and clearly there's a real separation between town and gown on many things.
Town and
gown. Town being the city and gown being the university. It's an old phrase. What would you do to ameliorate that, to bring town and gown better, closer together?
I think it starts with, honestly, one of the realities is most of the students that graduate from UW-Oshkosh, our alumni, live within 90 minutes of the university. And I think one of the things we have to start capturing is the alumni from that university, to say we educate them as taxpayers, we subsidize their education, and the problem is they leave because the opportunities aren't here. So I think we have to do, and I've noticed this, that the university has put a lot more effort at creating the career fairs, the job fairs, the career services, has really gotten more involved with the other non public entities, like the chamber, and then looking at, how can they match up the employers with the students, because I think the transition comes when students recognize that opportunities are here and that this community is a place for them. I think that it'll change. I think right now what they see is those 7 blocks of their reality, and then I think they say, Oshkosh, what does it have to offer me? And if they don't understand a value of, hey, this offers you everything. Where else can you live where you can afford a mortgage? Where else can you live? I mean, I've lived in Washington, D.C., I've lived in San Diego. You can't pay your student loan debt and service a house in those markets.
Probably hardly pay the rent.
You can't, right. Here you can. And if you want to start a family, if you're young, if you're getting married, you're starting out. But on the same side, business here, we have to recruit the business that has those entry-level opportunities for new graduates. Do we have that? Do we have enough of that? We graduate 2,000 people a semester, approximately. We can't give them jobs. If we could, I think they'd feel different.
Okay. In recent years, the council has rushed through some projects. The Leach Amphitheater was rushed through. I think that there was some initial rush with the Five Rivers project, even though that rush sort of dragged on for a year and a half or 2 years. But there was this rush of excitement, and therefore rush to create a TIF district, rush to do this. And as part of that, there was a closed session meeting that was held almost a year ago that my regular co-host and I did file a complaint against the city for holding that meeting. And the Attorney General, kind of agreed with us. Now, the city attorney, however, said, no, this is a legal meeting. And even after that opinion came down, he still says that he would, advise the council that they were still meeting in a legal meeting.
Fashion.
Now, you're an attorney. I suspect that this situation, given that attitude of our city attorney, may very well come up again. If you're on the council and something like that arises and there's a question about a meeting, whether it's in your own mind, excuse me, or a citizen raises it, how will Jess King, the attorney, reconcile that with Jess King, the city council person, who's being told by the city attorney it's okay to go into this meeting?
Well, I think it's important to have a rapport with your fellow council members, and I think each of the council members respects what the other ones bring to the table as far as how they vote to go into closed session, what they think about things. And obviously everything is situational, and if it truly warrants, but I respect the Attorney General's opinion, and I am not afraid to let my opinion be known about things like that. And I think it's very time, place, manner in when you choose to exercise that power, and it has to be very limited and very defined in how government uses that power. And I can think of a few examples where you say, well, what is the harm what is the perception of the population for why you're doing those things? And it really, it is true. It does look like you have something to hide. Do we? And then on the other hand, I respect that I am a bankruptcy practitioner. I do business workouts, I do consumer bankruptcies, I do consumer advocacies. So, one of the cardinal rules of being an attorney is never represent yourself and know your role. But I'm not afraid to question. And I mean, it is important to look at what the Attorney General's opinions say. And the threat of lawsuit, the threat of impropriety, how far do you push those things? To be quite honest, a lawsuit would be expensive, and why waste the tax monies in that way in defending something like that if it's not needed?
Well, to his credit, Councilman Paul Esslinger refused to go into that meeting.
Didn't go to the meeting. Yep.
And if you were seated on the council, Jess, would you then, if I'm understanding you correctly, would you be one to say, this is too questionable, I'm not going to attend?
It depends on the issue, but I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to do that.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
I analyzed two type of people that currently serve on the council. I just want to get your response to it. And I'm not going to name anybody. But there's the nitpicker and the micromanager that's sort of a character.
Let's see, who might those be,
All right.
Dan?
Okay.
And then there's the rubber stamps. There's a joke that if Warren Kraft opened the window on the 4th floor, at least 3 or 4 of them would jump out.
Okay.
Where is Jess King going to be in are you going to be in either camp? Where do you think? I mean, because there clearly are factions that I may be oversimplifying those differences, but
if I am going to be classified, I can hear the criticism of myself already, and that is that who does she think she is? Because I think big.
Okay.
And I think I get criticized for saying, well, you can't do that. That's not, that won't ever happen.
Okay.
Like I think people will. That's what they'll say, because my vision for the community and how the council is going to run has a lot to do with advocacy moving higher. And to say we need to be proud of our local government. I want the average citizen to say my council does a good job. And right now they're not doing it because of what's going on, because there is a lack of communication. People don't understand what the goals of the community are. The council members aren't setting an agenda. And I put this in the 10 questions that the Northwestern put out. I think the council reacts to the packet instead of establishing goals. And I don't like the word accountability for the very reason that it doesn't ask for self-reflection and self-ownership. And I'm a very independently motivated person. And so I'm gonna shoot big. The problem is, if I have a big idea, I have to get a couple people to go along with me.
Sure.
And when then you say, okay, well, who are the rubber stamps? Who are the nitpickers? Who are the naysayers? How do they react to me?
Yeah.
And this could be they don't go along with me, but that's not going to stop me from beating my drum.
But you have to build those coalitions for 4 votes.
You do.
Yeah.
Or 5.
Yeah,
I mean, you
or
could
5.
have an important question, and so I respect that. That's going to be my block, is to say, obviously most of the people that are on the council, the composition of it, there are people there who I think are naysayers or are nitpickers, or will look at an idea I have and say, why are we wasting our time on this? And I'll say, because it takes 25 years to truly see the impact of a decision on a governmental level in many cases. And I know that we may not see the repercussions immediately, but they'll be there. And I think bigger.
One of the questions, I'm sorry.
Just one more on
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
provincialism versus globalism. One of the things that struck me, and I'm not asking whether you voted yes or no on it, but there was a motion to put an advisory vote to immediate withdrawal of National Guard and reservists from Iraq.
Sure.
And the vote was, I don't know, 5-2 or 6-1, I don't know what it is. But one of the council members, and I won't mention who it was, said that if we put this on the ballot, this city would be hostage for 3 months. All we would talk about is the war in Iraq. The war in Iraq is something that we're all talking about. Would you as a council member say that shy away from any national, international issue that still affects the people and be only a person who only deals with streets and garbage and all that? Or would your worldview extend to?
I'm global. I think if students are organizing themselves to put a question on a ballot and they follow the procedures, it should be there. I think if they approach me and ask me in my council capacity to do that, I'll do it. Because that's the whole point, is public participation. You know, some people say, oh, what about the cost of putting the extra question on there, and you have to tabulate that. But I'm not about stifling opinion or people, and I think that just is the wrong impression to leave.
Public participation. I know you've talked in the past about making our community boards, you know, our city boards and commissions more diverse, if you will, and have greater participation from diverse cultures and what have you. How would you go about doing that? Because I've served on different boards and commissions in the city, and the one I'm currently on, I've been on for I think 7 years now. And I know from past experience that we have a really difficult time just getting people to apply. So what would Jess King do or suggest to try and get more participation?
Sure. I think number one thing that I would like to do, and I think a lot of this is soft diplomacy of a council member. I think it's a lot of phone calls. I think first I'd like to talk to the people that serve on each committee and get some feedback of how they feel their committee process is going. Number two, I think one of the main participation problems has to do with the time and place of the meeting. And I think we really need to start looking at the fact that the average home is a 2 breadwinner home. They work for a shift. They can't get off work. We have to start looking, you know, is it 8 a.m. meeting for a public committee? Is that viable for most people to serve? Do people have employers that are flexible? I mean, for me to run as a council member, I had to get permission from my employer, and he knew there's all these conflicts with your job. And I think we have to address that. We have to address the time and place of meetings, and to see how comfortable the current, you know, and then the liaisons from the city staff. You know, one of the, you know, that's also an issue with, you know, when are they available, and maybe they would enjoy the flex time or having a different hour schedule. And so first is getting feedback, and then it's making the ask. What I find is, as I go to the police department or the Convention and Visitors Bureau, you see that there is a more mature level of volunteer, and I feel that it's time to start asking people of my generation to say, hey, what are you interested in? Start serving. Make a difference.
Okay. One of the, you had mentioned before the questions that the Northwestern asked, and one of them was, what are the appropriate uses of TIF districts, and are there existing districts that you would have opposed, and why? Now, you had said that TIF districts are used to expand the tax base by providing public improvements and expenditures necessary to promote industrial development, redevelopment, or eliminate blight. These tax incremental districts should be created in areas where economic development or rehabilitation would otherwise not occur but for the creation of the districts. Do you think that we are using that but for exercise in the city of Oshkosh?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, I do.
How are we? I mean, for example, the Five Rivers project, now a TIF was created for that. That's prime real estate along the river. And how do we test that but for, how do we impart or implore or whatever, implement that but for exercise if the first thing we're doing out of the chute is creating a TIF every time we turn around? We're not seeing if they'd come to the table with a development if they didn't have the TIF.
Well, part of it, my understanding, and obviously you can always get more information, and maybe as I educate myself, you know, maybe things will change. But one of the things that I recognize about that particular area is, what did it look like before? You know, at what point before city intervention, where was that development? And I would say that prime real estate wasn't really prime before the city started to get involved with it. I think that you have to, and as my profession, as a business reorganization attorney, one of the things I'm very familiar with is the cash flow of startup businesses. And, you know, what do we really want as a community? And land use is a very important part of the council's swords and shields. We have to make sure that something goes there that's going to have a long-term economic benefit. So I'd say, you know, but for, I mean, what else is going to go there that's going to really spin off a positive economic growth? And if we don't get involved and it continues to lay, not fallow, but not active, you know, that's how you measure the but for. Can there be hindsight? You know, maybe there can, but what was it before we got involved? And I think that's the yardstick. And then to say, if we didn't get involved, who has the capacity to buy it? Can they buy it in a usable piece? Maybe not.
How did you feel about the Five Rivers development? And and I asked that question because that developer has said that he may very well come back to the city with something else for that area. So I asked that question because I do think it's a viable question. And then the second part of that is, how do you feel about the access plan, the one that Access and Tommy Thompson are part of?
Okay. Obviously, and I said this during the debate, the Five Rivers is a black eye because it shows that people weren't doing enough homework. We weren't putting in enough deadlines. We weren't demanding enough results. And if you don't, you know, proof is in the pudding, right?
Yeah.
Proof is in what you bring to the table. Didn't happen. I honestly, I look at the Five Rivers, and one of the things I am very concerned about is our tourism infrastructure and how we capture the room tax, how we capture accommodations. If you look at Oshkosh, we are economically, geographically positioned to be a convention destination. 8 out of the 10 most populous cities in Wisconsin are easily accessible by 41. As the 41 corridor grows, we need to capture that. There's no doubt in my mind. You know, whether Five Rivers fits the bill, I don't think so. I honestly think it's better to have competition, better to have a strong convention center with more satellite boutique hotels or things that provide a different range for various economies.
Okay.
It's more important to me.
Just very, very quickly, would
sure.
you support doing something with the existing convention center or building something new?
Well, I think we've got to see the study that comes back to see what we can afford.
Okay. Why don't you look into camera 3, Jess, and take about 30 seconds or so and tell
Time's
folks
up?
why they should. It is.
I'm a
Amazingly
talker.
enough.
Okay. I have experience as a representative. I have experience in the capacity as an advocate. I believe in the city, and I'm willing to work hard. This is definitely a volunteer job as a council member. I know we get a stipend, but the reality is you have to ask yourself when you go to the polls on February 20th, who do you really believe is going to do the work? Who do you feel is articulate? Who do you believe will really give you a fair shake and will investigate all the sides? And those are the things that I'm promising to do. Whether or not that brings tangible results that you necessarily agree with on every issue may not be the case.
Okay, very good. And on that note, we have to wrap up. Thank you, Dan. Thank you. We'll see you again. And as always, thanks to you.
Good luck,
We'll
Jim.
see
Thanks
you
for
next
coming
time.
in.
Until
Thank you.
then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.